Hey guys, it's Haley and welcome to another bookish video. Today we're going to be talking about some more of my top 12 recs. This time around, we're going to the creature features, and I admittedly do not read a ton of these, but the ones in this video I have picked up on a whim and really loved. There are a couple in here that ride the line between thriller and horror, but for the most part, these are horror books. That doesn't mean they're scary though. I have a range in here from pretty extreme horror, not like extreme, but like horror, to what I would call like horror for beginners. By the way, I have an entire recommendation video on horror books for beginners coming out in the next couple months. Someone recommended that I do that, and I really appreciated that suggestion, so thank you so much. And this rec video also came from a suggestion people were asking for creature feature recommendations, so that is why I'm here making this video. I love to give y'all what you actually want, so comment below any recommendation videos you guys want in the future. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the recommendations. If you have never seen one of my top 12 recommendation videos before, I will link the entire playlist up above and down below so you can watch them all. But basically how this format works is I take a subgenre or a specific trope within the horror and thriller genres, and I zoom in on it and give you my top 12 books that fit into that category. So my first creature feature that I want to talk about is actually a fairly recent read, but it really took me by surprise. And that is Spider Sight by Tirza M.M. Hawkins. I absolutely loved this book. If you like creepy kid horror, you're going to absolutely love this one. If you like something like Baby Teeth or The Push by Ashley Audrain, you're gonna love this one. It has that kind of structure with a creature feature twist. Basically, we are following this little girl who has imaginary friends, and they're all invisible spiders that no one else can see, just her. And of course, her parents do not believe that these spiders are real. They think that she just is being a child and having an imaginary friend. But things start to become eerily real and a little too close to home when people start dying around their daughter. So we are trying to figure out, number one, what is actually going on with this child? Are these spiders real? And number two, how are these people dying? And things go absolutely off the rails. I loved every second of this book. The creature, we get its perspective at some points in the book, and it is just so much fun, so creepy. If you're not scared of spiders, you will be after reading this. It is super fast paced, super fun. The way that the horror just like escalates and escalates is great. It gave me that creepy crawly feeling, but it wasn't anything too intense. So I think beginners could also get on board with this, especially if you already like thrillers like Baby Teeth or, like I said, The Push or The Perfect Child by Lucinda Berry. So highly recommend this one. Next up, I want to talk about Pearl by Josh Malerman. And in this book, we are actually following the perspective of a murderous pig. Yes, you heard me right. There is a pig named Pearl on this farm, and she's the queen of the farm in many senses of the word because she runs shit. She literally can infect people's minds and get them to do her bidding. So she has this like telekinesis is moving things with your mind. She has this like mind control ability, and she can manipulate people and pigs into doing her bidding, whether that is killing each other, killing themselves. Pearl is running the show on the farm. This book is absolutely ridiculous, but it is so much fun. It's so interesting and different to follow the perspective of this like evil mastermind pig. If you like ridiculous horror, you're gonna love this one, and it is such a good bloodbath. If you like slashers, this is kind of like a creature feature take on a slasher. I feel like nobody talks about this one, but I really enjoyed it. I love Josh Malerman's writing style. It's really engaging and well written. And we get all these different perspectives. We get to see how Pearl interacts with all these different people and who she kind of has a weak spot for. The character development is like great. Really, it honestly is great, but it's just so funny when you like close the book, sit back, and realize like I am following the mind of a murderous pig. So if you like weird shit like I do, you gotta pick up Pearl. Next, I do want to talk about Stephen King. Okay, we can talk about how Stephen King sucks all day long, but the thing is, I enjoy some of his books, so a couple of them are on this list. I feel like where Stephen King really shines for me is in creatures and like animal type of horror. And one of my favorites of his is The Mist. So I do love the novella, but I really love the movie. Just the story in general is great. I think I like the movie adaptation a little bit better, but this one is still really great. It's really small, so it's a quick read. And we are following this kind of apocalyptic storm that is hitting this town. And this father and son are trying to escape, evacuate, hunker down, and make sure that they survive this storm. And along with the storm comes this mist. And in the mist, there are these like kind of ambiguously described creatures. And basically, you don't want to know what happens when you go in the mist. Once you go in, the people who go in don't come out, and they just get attacked and like torn limb from limb by these creatures. It's very ambiguous. It is very creepy. If you are scared of the unknown, that is basically what The Mist plays on. Now, there are a few Stephen King-esque elements in this book. Like, you can very much tell that it's written by a man, and the main character is like very much a guy, so there's like the objectification of women and like misogyny and like things like that in this book. But if you're gonna overlook that and just give into the horror, this is one of the most effective creature features in my opinion because of the ambiguity. Sometimes in something like Pearl, like I wasn't scared because I was like, this is literally a murderous pig. Like, that is so funny. And when you picture like a cute little piggy, like Babe doing the murdering, it's just so funny. And this was actually terrifying because I didn't even have an image of what this creature would look like. All I knew is the carnage that it caused, which was just so scary. I would recommend this for fans of the next book I'm going to talk about, which is much more popular than The Mist, and that is Bird Box. I feel like Bird Box really had its moment probably like 3 or 4 years ago when the Netflix adaptation came out. Everyone was talking about it, and it kind of does a similar thing to The Mist. So if you like one, you will definitely like the other, where the creatures are ambiguous. It's more of a psychological horror, but there definitely is a creature element, so I would call it a creature feature. We are also in an apocalyptic scenario in this book, and people are dying of this like weird psychological condition where they have one glimpse of something. Nobody knows what it is. Again, super ambiguous. And once you see it, you are just driven to commit insane violence. Whether it's killing other people or unaliving yourself. If you see this creature, you're done for. And what really shines in this book is the character dynamics and the psychology of this creature. It's a very advanced creature. It's not a straightforward like, I'm running from a monster. It's the way that a monster can infect the human mind. And I think that's what makes it so effective and what really shocked people about this book when a wider audience saw it through the movie. It's so unique, and I think it has such a big impact on the genre. We can even see with something like A Quiet Place. I feel like that was heavily inspired by Bird Box, or the concept that Bird Box plays on. So if you like horror like that, you will love Bird Box. Next, let's just address the other Stephen King book on this list, and it is my favorite of all of King's work, and that is Pet Sematary. Now, when I say Pet Sematary, you're probably picturing zombie cats, which is kind of accurate because those are the creatures of the feature. But more than that, the scary part of Pet Sematary was, again, the psychological nature of it. And the creatures, these zombified things that were buried in the pet cemetery and then come back to life, are scary as well, but they're more a metaphor for the emotional concepts that are delved into with the grief representation in this book. It is such a visceral commentary on grief, and I just loved every single moment of this book. It affected me so deeply. I loved the writing. It was engaging. I loved all the different elements of it. We're following this little family who lives on the side of this pretty busy highway, and because there are cars rushing by all the time, a lot of pets, if you lose track of them or they run out of the house, they have a high risk of getting hit by a car and dying. So they have this pet cemetery, but there's something creepy about it. There's undead elements, and things go awry when not just pets are being buried near there. I will leave it at that, but do know that there are trigger warnings for this book. If you're experiencing something like really heavy grief, really heavy depression, this probably wouldn't be the best read for you, but it has such great like fall ambiance. If you're looking for things to add to your upcoming fall TBR or like for Halloween, I think Pet Sematary is a perfect read for that. Next up, we have one of my favorite books that I've read this year, and that is Night Bitch by Rachel Yoder. And I know this one is so controversial. I feel like the reviews that I hear, people either have given it 1 star or 5 stars, but I definitely have landed in the 5-star camp, and I'll tell you why. This book is really hard to pitch because really the synopsis is just this woman thinks that she's becoming a dog, a werewolf, a something. This woman is kind of like becoming a creature. And throughout the course of this transformation, she's trying to figure out if it's even real or if it's all in her head and she's going crazy. But she also learns a lot about herself and the different parts of herself that are awakened throughout the course of this transformation. It's really plotless. We're just following this woman and how this experience is affecting her. I love weird feminist character-driven horror, and that is exactly what this is. There's a ton of commentary on what it's like to be a wife, to be a mother, and just to be a woman in a world that expects so much from you, and the precarious balance that women have to hold at all times. I felt really seen by the conversations that went on in this book, and while this is horror, I think it's literary as well. I wasn't scared really by the creature-ness of this book. Again, it was more just horror on a psychological level, and now that I'm talking about a lot of these books, I'm sensing a theme. I think my favorite creature features are when the actual creature is a metaphor for something that is a lot more terrifying, but also harder to name. Something like grief or misogyny or, you know, something that's deeply, deeply painful that is hard to communicate about and is a little bit more digestible to be seen as a creature. Similar to that concept, I want to recommend Ring Shout. This is definitely not your typical creature feature. Again, there are ambiguous creatures in this book. We are following this ragtag group of 3 Black women who are huntresses. And they're set in a time that simultaneously feels like a long time ago, but also feels like it's in the future. Like there are these futuristic like cyborg elements, but it also has a very historical feel. I always describe it as like steampunk. That's the best way that I can describe Ring Shout. And these 3 huntresses are trying to take out these things called kluxes. So at the time, the KKK is raging in this novel. And besides these human KKK members, there are also these creatures called kluxes that they're trying to hunt down. They're just these murderous, rampaging creatures. And obviously, it's a metaphor for racism and how insidious and murderous racism can be and was at the time. There is a lot of great commentary in here, but besides that, it is just really action-packed. It is so fun to follow these 3 badass women fighting creatures. Like, it's just fun. People describe it like superhero-y in a way. I definitely wouldn't describe it as that because I actually heard that pitch for a couple of years and it put me off from reading the book. If you've heard those kind of descriptions, it's not superhero, it's not fantasy. It's definitely more like steampunk horror that is rich with feminism, racial commentary, and there is so much culture packed into this book. It is so great. So again, not your typical creature feature, but one of my favorites. Next up, let's talk about a couple snowy books. We all know that I love a snowy, isolated setting, and that is the perfect place to put in a creature because just the image of like being trapped, snowed into a place and having creatures stalking outside. Absolutely terrifying. So I have two books that kind of fit that trope on this list. The first one is Stolen Tongues by Felix Blackwell. And if you're asking me the book that scared me the most on this list, it has to be Stolen Tongues. I don't know what it was about it. It was just absolutely terrifying. I was reading it on my own in the dark in my house, and all of a sudden I felt frozen in place, like I couldn't get up and take off my makeup to go to bed because I was so scared there was gonna be a creature stalking the home. So in this book, we are following an engaged couple that goes on this getaway to this isolated snowy cabin, and something is stalking around outside and making these creepy noises. The guy in the couple starts hearing his dear fiance talking in her sleep, and he realizes that she's talking back to this creature, and it's somehow wormed its way into her mind where she is able to communicate with it in this weird, creepy language. And when you hear the language, it is haunting. I highly recommend the audiobook for this one. Just reading it physically, I was scared, but I wasn't that scared. When I was following along with the audio, oh my God, that's when I really lost it. And this creature follows them home. We see their journey as they try to escape it. It is terrifying, and this creature will live in my mind rent-free, probably forever. And then the other snowy creature feature that I have on this list is Near the Bone by Christina Henry. Now, this book is super, super layered. This is not just a straight up creature feature. There are also elements of like serial killing and an abusive relationship. So there are multiple different sources of the horror, but the creature is definitely a big part of it. We are following this married couple who lives in an isolated, snowy place. And when the wife is out one day, she sees this dead animal and she's like, no, this was not killed by a human. This was killed by something that could kill me. So she immediately is super scared about it, but her husband is totally gaslighting her, and we are trying to figure out what is actually out there and will it come for them. And at the same time, we're trying to get her, this poor woman, out of this abusive situation. And there are also talks of a killer stalking in the same woods. There's just so much going on in this book. It is so well done. This plot could have easily been really muddy and overwhelmed by all the different directions that it's going, but it was masterful, and the twists in this book were so good. If you like thrillers and you're wanting to get into horror, I feel like this is a great place to start, especially if you're interested in going into something that's like a little bit far beyond what's actually in reality. I feel like this creature is pretty accessible. It's, again, ambiguous, so you don't have to picture this like crazy, hairy beast. You can just give into the horror of the effects that it has on what goes on around. Next up, let's talk about one of my favorites from last year, and that is Below by Laurel Hightower. If you are a fan of the Mothman, you're going to love this book. It is a short little novella that had my heart pumping. It is so fast-paced and high octane. I was like in. From the second I started reading, I could not put it down. We are following this woman who is on this treacherous drive trying to get to her friend's bachelorette party, and the roads are like really bad conditions. So she stopped at a rest stop, and a trucker offers to follow her and make sure that she gets to her destination okay. And you would kind of think that it would turn into a serial killer horror book from there, where this guy is like stalking her and running her off the road. But no, she actually witnesses the trucker run off the road, and she's caught in this moral dilemma where she either goes down to help out this benevolent stranger who is going to protect her on her drive, or she carries on without him and lets him basically die as he ran off the road. And throughout the course of making this decision, because I won't give it away, she starts to be stalked by this creature that's also out there with her and the trucker. It's giving very Mothman vibes, as you can tell by the cover, and I just loved everything about it. It is weird, it is quick, it is fast-paced, it is intense, it is scary, the imagery is great, the character development's great, I love a moral dilemma, I love the commentary in here. It was just everything that I love, so condensed in this little horror book. Like, I literally could not ask for more. That's why it was on my favorites of the year. And I know, again, this is a controversial one. A lot of people don't love Below. I do. I love everything Laurel Hightower does, so take it with a grain of salt, but I love it. Next up, let's talk about an alien. I want to recommend The Visitor by Sergio Gomez. I absolutely love this book. It was one of the first horror books that I read that had like a creature kind of element rather than a human kind of evil. And it just really worked for me. I definitely had to adjust my expectations going in because I wasn't expecting it to be this like sci-fi creature feature kind of horror. But once I did and I got on board, I loved it. We are following these people who are trapped in, again, a snowstorm. I just love a snowy creature feature, apparently. Not really great for right now if you're a seasonal reader like myself, but put it on your Christmas horror TBR. All these people are trapped in a snowstorm on Christmas, and we are following this creature who we don't know how it got here, and we're trying to figure out how and why it's here as the creature goes around to create havoc and basically slash everyone it can find. It reads like a classic slasher, but if the thing doing the slashing was this galactic creature. It is so much fun, and I love the way Sergio Gomez writes a slasher. Camp Slaughter is one of my favorite horror books ever. I love that series, so I highly recommend it, even if you're not a sci-fi girl, because I'm not either. I think you'll like it. And the last book that I have on this list is We Can Never Leave This Place by Eric LaRocca. Oh my God, y'all know how much I love Eric LaRocca, and they've done it again. This was very unexpected for me. I honestly did not expect to love a book that's this out of my comfort zone this much, but I feel like this book really got me okay with reading creature features and reading things that have like fantastical elements that do not take place in reality. In this tiny little horror novella, we're following a little family who is in an apocalyptic world, and the walls are basically crumbling outside of their apartment, but they're trying to like hunker down and survive in their little space. And something traumatic happens to the family, which I'm not going to spoil, I'm not going to give it away. But to deal with it, the mother ends up inviting in these horrifying, overgrown bug creatures to try to help them survive in this world. And it is so creepy. It is so weird. It is so terrifying. It's so uncomfortable. Like, I get the creepy crawlies just thinking about it. This whole book is basically like that one scene in Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires with the roaches. Yeah, if that one freaked you out, this one's definitely gonna freak you out. There's a lot of commentary in here about family trauma, about generational trauma and how it passes down. I love, love, love the commentary, love the creepy creatures, loved it all. So that is going to round out my top 12 creature feature horror book recommendations. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and got a couple recs. If you did, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to go to therapy and read a book this week, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!